The name Amenemhet means Amen is the head. Besides Pharaoh Amenemhet and biblical Abraham living in the same place at the same time, is there any other evidence connecting biblical Abraham to Pharaoh Amenemhet I? According to Egyptian history, Pharaoh Amenemhet I was not of royal blood, and his family origin is unknown. Egyptology experts believe he seized the throne of Egypt after murdering Pharaoh Mentuhotep. In 1818, Antonio Lobolo made a revolutionary discovery that identified the biblical Abraham as an Egyptian pharaoh. During Lobolo's excavations in the Egyptian Valley of the Kings, he exhumed 11 Egyptian mummies along with rolls of papyri inscribed with hieroglyphic writings and drawings. One of those drawings was interpreted by Mormon Joseph Smith and his Egyptologists as Abraham sitting on the pharaoh's throne. Abraham's name was also deciphered on a roll of papyrus. Joseph Smith published his controversial findings in the Book of Abraham in 1842 and was murdered 2 years later. Today, the only Egyptian pyramid tomb forbidden to the public is the tomb of Pharaoh Amenemhet I, who many researchers now believe is the biblical Abraham. Why have Egyptologists never found the remains of Pharaoh Amenemhet I or a biblical Abraham? The best explanation is that their common remains are concealed inside the famous Ark of the Covenant. The Hollywood movie Raiders of the Lost Ark was about the search for the lost Ark of the Covenant. According to the Bible story, the tablets of the 10 Commandments given to Moses by God were stored inside the Ark. Egyptian artifacts tell the true story about what's really inside the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is, in fact, an Egyptian canopic chest, where the dried organs of royal kings and pharaohs were stored, not the 10 Commandments. Why did the Hebrews call their royal canopic chest the Ark of the Covenant? Because the name signifies the covenants or promises that God made with Abraham. Would the Hebrews carry the Ark of the Covenant into battle to kill and steal if it really contained commandments like, "Thou shalt not kill or steal"? The best explanation is that the Ark contained the remains of their ancestral leader who led them into battle. Biblical Hebrew rulers like King Solomon broke all of the commandments, just like today's rulers who make and break laws and commandments to exploit the obedient masses. The evidence shows that the ancestral patriarch of the Hebrew Jews is Amenemhet I, and that his biblical name is Abraham. Since Pharaoh Amenemhet worshipped the god Amen, are Amen and the biblical God the same God? Michelangelo's Vatican painting of God depicts God as an angry, bearded white man. God's words, actions, and deeds in the Bible's Old Testament show God's extreme favoritism for the Hebrews generally and for Hebrew males in particular. By today's standards, that behavior is considered both racist and sexist. God admits to being a jealous God who approves of ritual human and animal sacrifice as proof that he is obeyed and worshipped above all other gods. He terrorizes, punishes, and kills the enemies of the Hebrews. He uses his godly power to kill Egyptian children and spread plagues, famines, pestilence, and darkness. He magically turns staffs into deadly venomous snakes and turns the Nile River into blood. Like the biblical god, the god Amun-Ra also turns the Nile River into blood in the Egyptian myth of Hathor. The Bible God's opinion of humanity is that all human beings are sinful children who are all born into sin. Since his words and deeds describe an angry, violent, and jealous God, are the biblical God and the ancient Egyptian god Amun, whose name is repeated over and over in the Bible, one and the same God? What is an Egyptian pyramid and the eye of the Egyptian god Horus doing on the American $1 bill? Why have Washington, London, and the Vatican erected towering obelisk monuments honoring the pagan Egyptian god Amun-Ra? In the next Bible episode, Abraham's son Isaac, who Abraham almost stabbed to death, grows up to father twin boys named Jacob and Esau. A murderous rivalry develops between the twins, and Jacob flees to a place known today as Bethel in Israel. He lays his head down to rest on a large, smooth stone and dreams of a stairway reaching to heaven like a ladder. The stairway in Jacob's dream describes the step pyramids built by Egyptian pharaohs like ladders reaching to heaven. The symbolic stone where the Hebrew Jacob laid his head thousands of years ago in Bethel is alternately called the Stone of Jacob, the Stone of Destiny, and the Stone of Scone. Today, the symbolic stone can be found underneath the British throne chair on top of the symbolic step pyramid where the Queen and other British monarchs have been crowned.
The battered oak coronation throne, on which every English monarch has been crowned, is built over the Stone of Scone.
As the Bible story continues, God promises Jacob that a nation and a company of nations shall come from him, and kings will spring from him. Jacob marries two of his girl cousins and fathers 12 sons. As Jacob ages, Joseph becomes his favorite son, and Dan becomes his venomous son. Jacob eventually takes his sons and his Hebrew clan and migrates from Canaan into Egypt. This Hebrew migration into Egypt closely parallels Egyptian history when the Semitic Hyksos migrants overthrew the Egyptian pharaohs and seized the throne of Egypt. One of the Semitic Hyksos leaders who became king of Egypt was Yaqubeir. Since Yaqubeir is the Aramaean name for Jacob, Egyptology experts interpret this as factual evidence that the biblical Jacob and the Hyksos king Yaqubeir were one and the same. Historical records show that the Semitic Hyksos kings ruled Egypt for over 100 years. The Egyptian people rebelled against these Semitic kings and pushed them into northern Egypt. By 1500 BC, a peace agreement was reached between the Egyptians and the Semitic Hyksos, which allowed the Hyksos people to leave Egypt peaceably and move to Palestine and Jerusalem in the Egyptian-controlled land of Canaan. Their gradual and peaceful migration closely matches the Bible story of the Semitic Hebrew exodus from Egypt into Canaan in 1447 BC. According to the Bible story, when the Hebrews arrived in Canaan, they renamed it Israel and divided the land up into 12 tribal states, which they named after the sons of Jacob. Jacob's favorite son Joseph stayed behind in Egypt. Joseph hid his Hebrew identity by marrying an Egyptian wife and changing his name to the Egyptian name Zaphanath-Paneah, which means he who can reveal secrets. According to the Bible, Joseph ruled Egypt as the Pharaoh's top vizier and bought up all the private land in Egypt from the starving people. Then he taxed them out of 1/5 of their income. Was Joseph the chief vizier of Pharaoh and Moses, who negotiated the peace agreement allowing the Semitic Hebrew Hyksos people to settle in the Egyptian-controlled land of Canaan? The Hebrew connection to the Egyptian pharaohs is further revealed in the biblical story of Moses.
Many years ago, in a land called Egypt,